Hello everybody, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. Today I'm going to be bringing you a ladder game between two gold/platinum level players. This is going to be the red Terran, PlayerX, who I actually believe plays random, and he's going to be fighting NuffSaid, who is the blue Terran. So this is going to be a Terran versus Terran here on Typhon Peaks on the fairly close positions. I guess this is not technically as close as you can get. Still pretty far since every base starts in the corner, so we will see how both of these guys decide to react to a map like this. Now, just kind of getting into this game, and like I do in most of my games, if you have a replay of your own, I will cast it and I will post it if it's a cool replay, so send me your best stuff to communitysc2@live.com, or you can send me a message to this YouTube account if you've already uploaded your replay to a hosting site somewhere, and I will cast it. And like I said, if it's a cool game, you'll see it on my channel, and at some point in time, if your game comes up, it will be featured on my channel front page, so that's kind of cool. But anyway, we'll go ahead and jump right into this game and see exactly what's going on. Both of them thus far are macroing properly, making SCVs constantly. Down goes the barracks for both players at pretty much the same timing. The weird thing about Terran versus Terran, and I'll get into this more as I put out a Terran versus Terran guide later on. I don't know how far down the road it's going to be, but there's a bunch of different openings that you can do to throw each other off. Basically anything before about even up to like 12 minutes. It just depends on the tempo of the game. Almost anything is viable out of out of your barracks, out of your factories, out of your starports. There's so many different different things that can go on in that early stage of the game that you really have to pay attention to, and you really have to be on top of your scouting and really react quickly, because some of those weird pushes can end it. You can be anything from like mass marines to quick tanks to fast hellions to drops to banshees to quick ghosts I've seen recently. I mean, there's a whole bunch of weird stuff you can do in early Terran versus Terran that you really can't pull out in other matchups. So interesting stuff that you can do. We'll see if either of these players go for that. You can see a gas came down for PlayerX on fairly normal timing. 2 gases are now going to be out for NuffSaid, whereas his orbital is actually not started yet. You typically want to get it started as soon as your barracks is done, so he's going to be falling behind just a little bit in economy, as he does not have his orbital up, and whereas PlayerX does, he's going to be able to mule. PlayerX did supply block himself a little bit. One thing I like to do if I supply block myself as Terran is pull more than one SCV to build more than one supply depot at a time, so that if I have units queued up on some buildings, then they will all be able to come out and I'll still have some room to make more, instead of having to worry about making more supply depots right immediately afterwards. So you can kind of do it however you want. It's just a little bit of insight into how I play Terran when I do play Terran. See a second gas now coming up for PlayerX. Both players' factories are about done. NuffSaid's just now finishing. He's going to go ahead and throw a tech lab on there, so we're not going to see any weird Hellion plays. Pretty fast starport coming out from NuffSaid, which usually indicates banshees at this point. If PlayerX had any chance to get any scouting in there, he would be able to see what's going on. But again, when you're scouting Terran at this stage of the game, you can really learn a lot by just poking up the ramp a little bit, maybe even sacking a unit just to see what they have on the field. If you saw only 3 Marines, that would mean either a quick expansion or tech play like we're seeing come down here. So the only problem in Terran versus Terran is that the tech play can mean a whole lot of different things, but at least you'll know it's not any sort of like crazy Marine rush or a quick bio rush or anything like that, or at least you can suspect. I mean, most people will stash their units at their front door, but anyway, getting back into this game, we're going to see a command center coming up from PlayerX. Banshee cloaking is also on the way for NuffSaid, so this could be pretty troublesome as there's no engineering bay, or excuse me, actually there is an engineering bay down from PlayerX, so good work there. Starport's now coming up for PlayerX, and what you'll see a lot of the time in a situation like this is when one player gets Banshees, the other one will just put out a Viking and put an end to all that Banshee nonsense for the most part, if they have detection, if in the rare instance there actually is cloaking. Well, it's not really rare, but I mean, you don't see as much cloaking as you will, I guess, non-cloaking Banshee plays out of Terran versus Terran. but it really just depends on the skill level, it depends on the player. Every player likes different stuff, and it's certainly viable in both directions. First Banshee is on the field, as we can see. Another Banshee and another Starport is going up for NuffSaid, so it looks like he's committing pretty hard to this, and he's still lifting off his factory and saving a tech lab, so we have to be thinking this is going to be 3 Starports in all likelihood if he's going to throw down another Starport, and yes he does, you can see it ghosting right there, so this is a really heavy commitment into Banshees, and if PlayerX is not ready for this, this is going to be a mess. He's not going to be able to hold this off. He really needs to drop a turret, like right here. A lot of players will drop it right in the middle of their mineral line, which your SCVs kind of do have to go a little bit out of your way, but you can see a little bit of a gap in the minerals. If you place it right here, they're not going to have to go that far out of their way in order to return mining. You're not going to lose that much time. Considering this is gold replay, I'm actually pretty impressed by PlayerX's macro. He's doing a really good job on staying on top of his SCVs and staying on top of his mule usage. I don't know what kind of information he has in NuffSaid's base. He has nothing. He's completely in the dark. All he has seen is this. And this is about the time where if nothing has really happened, you probably want to lay down a scan to see what's going on. If he scanned right here, he'd probably see either 1 or 2 of these Tech Lab Starports. That would give him a huge tell to say a lot of Banshees are coming. But nevertheless, we do see a more standard unit composition out of PlayerX, which is going to be Tank, Marine, and Siege Mode is on the way. More barracks are coming down. Again, this is really good macro from PlayerX. He's going for the 1-1-1 opening into expand and tacking on a couple of extra barracks. And with the extra gas buildup he'll be getting as soon as he puts these refineries down, he will be able to support more than 1 factory, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. It depends on what else you're producing and what upgrades you're getting. If you check the timings of your tanks, which is what you're going to be producing, it's 125 gas every 45 seconds. And if you take a look at your income, you can see that you produce, you produce 220, 240, somewhere around there on 2 geysers. So 4 is going to be about 460, somewhere in that range. You can produce, I would say 2 to 3 tanks. You won't be able to fully produce off of 3 factories if you're going for this tank marine. Plus you will be spending a little bit of your gas on medevacs too. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of macro while we're having a little bit of a downtime in this game. Here come Marines filtering out 1 by 1 to scout around, really to see what's going on. This is going to leave him very vulnerable at his main if Banshees decide to come in, which again, these Banshees are really piling up, and this is going to be really scary once these Banshees actually move out. Orbital is finally put up. This is well over saturation on this mineral field, so we can see 32 harvesters. Your optimal is 30, but even when you're at 30, they will drift just a little bit. So I'd say optimal is probably more like 27, 28 before you're ready to expand again. Here come these Banshees, and this could be a big, big mess. You can see a whole bunch of missile turrets coming down. This PlayerX did land a scan, as we saw in the main there earlier. Cloak goes off a little bit preemptively. If you're running this Cloak Banshee stuff, number 1, you need to get these missile turrets down as soon as you can. Number 2, save your Cloak for a time when you actually need it so that they won't be prompted to throw down scans or anything like that. But this is such a huge Banshee force to be able to take out these turrets in just 2 shots. Here comes some Marines, and Marines versus Banshees is actually rather unfair in favor of the Banshees considering their DPS that they put out versus these weak Marines. All these Marines are falling. He really needs a scan. He does have energy on his second orbital command, but these Marines are not going to do anything to these Banshees. They do take out 2. But at this point, you don't really need to keep cloaking because there's nothing on the field that's even ready to fight you. Here come some more tanks that are just evacuating the main. All these buildings are going down, and yes, you do need to lift them off in order to preserve them. He is getting Vikings out, as we can see here, in order to try to deal with these Banshees. Checking the production tab, 3 more Banshees are on the way, as well as a Marine out of PlayerX, or rather out of NuffSaid. A couple of Vikings are about to pop. They should get out before the Starport is down, and yes, they do. He does lift up the Starport. He's going to have to repair that before it burns to death. These Vikings are going to take out any uncloaked Banshees, and this is the point where not cloaking until you really need it actually comes into play. So if he had cloaking, he would not need to evacuate at this point. He would not really be in fear of these Vikings because, you know, all these Banshees would be invisible, and he'd have to use all of his energy on his orbital command, which is very low on the scans. But here come the tanks. They're pushing into the main of NuffSaid. These tanks are obliterating these Marines, but they're unprotected, so all these tanks are going to go down. Here come the Vikings in order to support this, but not until after all the tanks are dead. So a little bit of a trade there. If NuffSaid was consciously wanting to fight Player X's only answer for this. He put out Vikings of his own instead of only Banshees at this point. NuffSaid's going to go back in for more. He needs to get on this mineral line, and you can see these turrets seem like they're decently placed, but NuffSaid can still just sit his Banshees right here and be out of range of turret fire and kill this command center, or pick off a whole bunch of SCVs without taking very much or any damage at all. Banshees are coming in. A bunch of SCVs here are just walking past, and he does turn around and focus down a couple of SCVs. This command center is going to go down or have to lift off at some point, and you can see the other orbital command is landed. We're seeing mass repair out of these SCVs, and now the SCVs are being targeted, but here come the Vikings in order to try to clean this up. So a lot of action here in the early game, really supporting the statement of anything can happen in Terran versus Terran in the early game. These Vikings are doing very good work for this Terran player. They have 8 kills. All of them are going to be Banshees. Down go most of his Banshees remaining. He's still just cranking out Banshees at this point. There's still 5 more sitting over here in addition to the 2 on the field and 2 more in production. NuffSaid really needs to expand, but PlayerX has that sort of locked down with a tank and a Marine. At least he's going to know when the expansion's coming. If we take a look at the income, PlayerX actually isn't as far behind as I would have originally thought. It's at 25 Harvesters versus 35 of NuffSaid, but all of those are going to be on one base, so these might as well be equal mining. As we can see, PlayerX is actually just slightly ahead in minerals, but a little behind in gas. NuffSaid is still rallying Banshees over here. 2 more Banshees on the way, in addition to 3 barracks. He does transform his command center into an orbital command before he's ready to fly it down. He needs to get this moving immediately and possibly even throw up an extra command center. As you can see, he's floating a lot of minerals, but not a lot of gas. A lot of times when you expand, especially as Terran, part of your expansions need to be just to grab these extra geysers, considering a lot of your higher tech units are so gas heavy, and if you don't have those higher tech units, you're dead. So if you can get more higher tech units out by way of getting more gases, then feel free to expand, not only just for that purpose, but keep in mind that those gas geysers are very valuable. You can see this orbital command trying to land. Last time I checked, 15 Marines are going to beat 1 Marine, and you can see the orbital command lands on top of the Marines' remains, so really adding insult to injury to that dead Marine. We can see a bunch more Banshees are coming out here. This is going to make 14 Banshees on the field for NuffSaid, but if PlayerX actually managed to put out a Raven on these, and in addition with his Vikings, he would shut down this Banshee play and really stick it to this Terran player relying on nothing but Banshees. I think his window for Banshees has passed at this point, considering they're fairly easy to counter once you have your own starport up, and especially if you have 2 command centers in order to lay down scans on there. With this many Vikings in the air, and with this kind of unit composition, I have to say that PlayerX is actually pretty ahead right now, even though the supply says that NuffSaid is ahead by 24 supply. Just that all of his supply is sank into these Banshees, which are going to be just cannon fodder for these Vikings once the engagement actually happens. So we're going to see these Banshees coming across. That Marine says, "Oh, this job sucks," and then gets focused down by 14 Banshees all at once. That's a terrible way to die. This Marine is going to suffer the same fate in all likelihood. Blam, he's dead. Sorry, Marine. And here come the Vikings. They're going to get easy kills on these Banshees. The speed of the 2 is almost exactly the same. I do believe the Vikings are just slightly faster. If we take a look at the 2.75 move speed, no, 2.75, they're both exactly the same. So either way, those Banshees, or rather those Vikings, were not going to catch up. NuffSaid does retain his Banshees quite wisely. He's building up a rather large Marine force. If you have this kind of Marines and you know there's this many tanks on the field, you really need to get Marine shields in addition to your armor upgrades on your Marines. It's really the only chance he has in winning an engagement between these 2 armies straight up. But you could keep the Terran player moving around with these Banshees if you do some good harassment on his base. You can see there are missile turrets up, but if you get Banshees around to pick off supply depots here and there, even just come in from the back, pick off a couple of missile turrets, and then get a bunch of these mules down, as you can see, are all landing in the same place, that would be a huge thing to try and get you back in the game. As we were talking about, PlayerX is now putting out a Raven in order to detect those cloaked Banshees. He's decided he's had enough of this fooling around with these Banshees, and he sees there's a huge amount of supplies and resources sank into these, so if he can make those dead investments, then PlayerX is going to easily win this game after this point.